Karen Silkwood was born in Longview, Texas on the 19th of February 1946. Her parents, Marla Biggs and William Silkwood, raised her and her two sisters, Linda and Rosemary, in Netherlands, Texas. Growing up, she was an intelligent girl who took a liking to chemistry. Later, she attended Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. In 1965, she married William Meadows. The couple went on to have 3 children. In 1972, Silkwood left Meadows due to the difficult economic issues brought upon by him due to his overspending, as well as his refusal to leave his mistress, and consequently end his affair. Silkwood eventually ended the marriage and moved to Oklahoma City, where she found a job as a hospital clerk. She was then hired by the Kerr-McGee Cimarron fuel fabrication site close to Crescent, Oklahoma, and in 1972 she joined the local Oil, Chemical and Atomic Workers Union, taking part in a strike against the Kerr-McGee plant. Following the strike, many workers left the union, so she was elected to the union's bargaining committee, becoming the first woman to hold that position at the plant. As part of the bargaining committee, she was tasked to investigate all health and safety related issues. After a few weeks, she discovered evidence of workers being exposed to chemical contamination, faulty respiratory equipment, and that samples weren't properly stored. All of these constituted numerous violations to the health regulations that were in place. She believed that the plant did not take the necessary health measures to protect their employees from contamination. According to Silkwood, the Kerr-McGee plant had manufactured faulty fuel rods, falsified inspection records, and risked employee safety. In the summer of 1974, Silkwood testified against the plant before the Atomic Energy Commission, or AEC. To support these claims, on the 5th of November 1974, at 6:30 p.m, she decided to perform a routine self-check to monitor herself for alpha activity with the detector that was mounted on the glove box. She discovered that the right side of her body read 20,000 disintegrations per minute, or about 9 nanocuries, mostly on the right sleeve and shoulder of her coveralls. After administering this test, she was taken to the plant's health physics office, where she was given a test called a nasal swipe. This test measured a person's exposure to airborne plutonium. The swipe showed an activity of 160 disintegrations per minute. After all analysis was complete, it was discovered that on her body was almost 400 times the legal limit for plutonium contamination. Consequently, due to the alarming results discovered on Silkwood, the 2 gloves in the glove box she had been using were replaced. Strangely, contamination was found on the inside of the gloves. This was odd, as the gloves had no holes, meaning someone must have tampered with the gloves. No plutonium was found on the surfaces in the room where she had been working, and filter papers from the 2 air monitors in the room show that there was no significant plutonium in the air. By 9 p.m, Silkwood's cleanup had been completed, and as a precautionary measure, Silkwood was put on a program that had urine and feces samples collected for 5 consecutive days to monitor the levels of her exposure to the chemicals. By 1:10 in the morning, she returned to the laboratory but did no further work in the glove boxes. As she left the plant, she monitored herself and found no traces of contamination. The very next day, she returned to work at 7:30 a.m. She examined metallographic prints for 1 hour and then left the laboratory to attend a meeting. Because of the recent contamination discoveries, she was placed on a desk job and was only responsible for paperwork duties, meaning she had no contact with any dangerous chemicals. However, she tested positive once again for plutonium. The detector registered alpha activity on her hands. Health physics staff members found further activity on her forearm, neck, and face, so they proceeded to decontaminate her. At her request, a technician checked her locker and car with an alpha detector, but no activity was found. Consequently, a more extensive decontamination was ordered on Miss Silkwood. On the 7th of November, she entered the plant at about 7:50 in the morning. Upon arrival, a nasal swipe test was carried out, showing significant levels of alpha activity on her body. Silkwood was dangerously contaminated, even expelling contaminated air from her lungs. After finding these significant levels of contamination, Silkwood was accompanied back to her home, which she shared with a roommate called Sherry Ellis. The apartment was surveyed, and the investigators discovered significant levels of activity all around her home. Even Sherry Ellis was found to have 2 areas of low-level activity on her. After the tests on her apartment were finished, both Silkwood and Sherry Ellis returned to the plant, and Ellis was cleaned up. The investigators were alarmed by the high contamination levels found in the 2 women's apartment. When asked how the alpha activity got into her apartment, Silkwood said that when she produced a urine sample that morning, she had spilled some of the urine. She then wiped off the container and the bathroom floor with tissue, and then flushed it down the toilet. The amount of plutonium at Silkwood's apartment raised concern. Therefore, Kerr-McGee arranged for Silkwood, Ellis, and Silkwood's boyfriend, Drew Steffens, who was also known to have spent significant time at their apartment, to be sent to the Los Alamos National Laboratory for intensive testing to determine the magnitude of the contamination that they had been exposed to. On Monday, November 11th, the 3 of them met with Dr. George Vales, the lead physician of the laboratory health division. He went on to explain to them that the test results taken from urine, feces samples, and several lung counts determined a small but significant amount of plutonium on their bodies. Dr. Vales estimated that Silkwood had about 6 to 7 nanocuries of plutonium in her lungs, much more than what was found in Ellis and Steffens. Yet this was less than half of the maximum permissible lung burden for workers, so he concluded that she should not be worried of the effects brought upon by radium poisoning, which can include developing cancer or, in extreme cases, death. Silkwood, Ellis, and Steffens returned to Oklahoma City on the 12th of November. Silkwood and Ellis reported for work the next day, but they were restricted from further radiation work. Silkwood claimed that she had been contaminated at the plant due to insufficient health measures established to protect employees from said contamination. On the other hand, the Kerr-McGee's management argued that Silkwood had deliberately contaminated herself in her own home in order to support these claims against the company. However, no concrete evidence was ever found to support this theory. One author stated that the security at the plant was minimal, making it possible for workers, such as Silkwood, to smuggle out chemical samples. Although this supports the theory that she could have contaminated herself in order to provide sufficient evidence in her lawsuit against the company, would she really have risked her life to do so? Eventually, Silkwood decided to take her story public. She gathered all the evidence she had accumulated to support her claims against the corporation and contacted David Burnham, a New York Times journalist, to publicly reveal the negligence of the Kerr-McGee plant regarding worker safety. After work that night, Silkwood went to a union meeting in Crescent, Oklahoma. At the end of the meeting, at about 7 p.m., she left alone in her car to meet Burnham, carrying with her a folder of evidence that she had been gathering against the company. At 8:05 p.m, the Oklahoma State Highway Patrol was notified of a single car accident 7 miles south of Crescent. The driver was Karen Silkwood. She died on the 13th of November 1974, aged just 28, due to multiple injuries. The Oklahoma State Trooper who investigated the accident reported that Silkwood's death was a result of a classic one-car sleeping driver accident. Mysteriously enough, the folder Silkwood had with her, which contained all of the evidence against Kerr-McGee, was never retrieved from the wreckage, supporting the theory that this wasn't just a mere accident, but rather a conspiracy to keep Silkwood quiet. The car crash that resulted in Silkwood's death was staged to look like an accident, but after further investigation, the evidence found contradicted the conclusion that it was just an accident. The autopsy performed on Karen Silkwood concluded that before her death, she had taken a large dose of quaaludes, also known as methaqualone, which is a known sedative and hypnotic medication typically prescribed to patients suffering from severe cases of insomnia. The amount of the drug found in her blood was almost twice the recommended dosage for inducing drowsiness. Furthermore, there was another 50 milligrams of undissolved methaqualone still in her stomach. The elevated levels of the medication found in Silkwood's blood supported the theory that the accident that killed her was in fact an accident produced by her inhabilitation to drive due to the sedative that rendered her incompetent and probably caused her to doze off at the wheel. Skid marks and a dent in the rear bumper of her car signaled that she was driven off the road as opposed to have crashed herself. The saga of Karen Silkwood continued for years after her death. Silkwood's father Bill and her children filed a lawsuit on behalf of her estate. The suit against Kerr-McGee for negligence alleged an inadequate health and safety program that led to Silkwood's exposure and to hold the corporation liable for the punitive damages and the mystery surrounding her sudden death. The first trial ended in 1979, 5 years after Silkwood's death. The jury ruled in her favour, awarding the estate of Silkwood $10.5 million for personal injury and punitive damages. This was later reversed by the Federal Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado, which awarded $5,000 for the personal property she lost during the cleanup of the apartment. In 1986, 12 years after Silkwood's death, the suit was headed for retrial when it was finally settled out of court for $1.3 million. The Kerr-McGee nuclear fuel plants closed in 1975. In 1983, a film based on her life was released. Thank you everyone for watching this video on the case of Karen Silkwood. I hope you enjoyed it. This was recommended in the comments, so if you do have any suggestions, please leave me a comment or an email and hopefully I see it. That's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks!